Waiting for this thing to start. Okay. Hi, folks. We're once again dealing with the insanity of people saying that we need to open up society, uh, but saying that we need to open up the economy. We always could have had the economy open. We could have had it done from day one of the pandemic. What we needed to close was society. We needed to hunker down, not go out. Try to keep things to a minimum in terms of interacting with people. And I think that most people are pretty well aware that they can get a whole lot of commerce done sitting at home. They've been doing it. And it's just insane that they think that we're somehow restricting commerce by staying home. Now, what's getting restricted, what was been restricted during this Great Depression too, that started in 2008, and all these people don't want to acknowledge it because the politicians don't want to acknowledge it, and they worship these politicians, and they don't want to say Obama didn't do anything about the Great Depression too, and they don't want to say that there was still a Great Depression too when Trump came on, because they want to say, oh well, Obama, he avoided the Great Depression. He avoided the Great Depression. No, he didn't. We've been in a Great Depression. People don't understand what a Great Depression is. Okay, it's a long-running decline, and yes, people work during the Great Depression. Both my grandparents worked through the Great Depression in the 1930s. What does it mean? It means that there are a number of cases where people are unable to get a job again. They lose one, they finish the job, they get laid off or whatever, and they can't get back. I call it the employment carousel. So they can't get back on the employment carousel because there's way too many people looking for work, and compared to the number of jobs that are available. So we've been in this. And as I described in one of my videos, the way to handle this is to give people the money so that they can stay home. They don't have to go to some work where they can possibly infect people on the way there. And once they get there, infect them, so that they can live safely, have the income, have it coming into their bank account, order the pizza, order the Chinese food, order the stuff from the hardware store or the grocery store that they want, have it delivered. Okay, and maybe a few cases you go out and you wait on the line, you do the social distancing or whatever, but at least these businesses can be assured that there are customers, paying customers, and that's what people fail to recognize here. We're in the Great Depression too, already in the Great Depression, and we have on top of that a number of people who have lost their incomes because uh, they were working at a job, and I was, in fact, working a low-paying job in a restaurant when it had to close for the coronavirus. So even though I didn't have substantial employment all of 2019 and for a good portion of the beginning of 2020, I was at that particular point. I did have a job. I was there uh, 50 hours a week. That's what I was scheduled for. That's what I was doing. And I, like that, was fine with doing that. I was getting some money finally. And then I had the coronavirus thing. So on top of having to deal with the fact that I basically had a year of not being able to get any job. Of course, most qualified as a software developer, uh, but I wasn't able to get anything. And I have been throughout my life willing very much to work at anything in any capacity. The only thing that I'm leery of, I'm not a big fan of, I don't like to be a manager because I don't like to do the dirty work for the people higher up. Okay, I'm anti-democrat. Okay, democrat means people ruler, and I'm opposed to that. I don't want to be it. I've been in a situation where I was promoted and got into a position, and then I had to fire somebody that had been a colleague of mine when I came in, and he suffered from uh, the comparison with me making the code more efficient. And they're saying, why couldn't you do that? Well, I helped them, get further along with that, but they just wanted to fire him, and they needed somebody else to do it. And I do not like that at all. I'm opposed to it. I think it's cruel, and I think that if the economic democrats, these bosses, were honest and had any sort of integrity, they would do the job themselves of firing. They would go and tell the person that they weren't going to have an income. And that gets me to the other big point here is that we have built this mercantilist system. It's not capitalist; it's mercantilist. It deals with merchants and banks, and it's democratic mercantilist because it's a system of control, command control. It's a hierarchy. There are the people that rule, and then there's the not people who are ruled, and there's gradations in between. And so this system has to be abolished. And the best way of abolishing that is to give people a stipend, to give people money every week that they can use to pay for things so that they're able to live. And once they're able to live, once they're able to have that independence, then they can do other things. They can contribute in the civic governance, which is, a whole other area that gets ignored when people are talking about, well, we have to have all these Americans going back to work, and yeah, what about people participating in the town halls, or another great one, the PTA. Okay, when my kids were younger and going through elementary school, and I was part of the PTA. I didn't have a position with them, but I attended all the meetings and I contributed in a number of different ways. And they always, where is everybody else? There are hundreds of parents, and we only have the same half dozen people showing up to each one of these PTA meetings. So that's another thing that people can be doing. They can be contributing to their community, to their schools, and so on, with their presence, with their work, with their activity, their thought, their mind, applying to the various problems. All work does not have to be slaving away for some boss who's ordering you around, doing things that uh, quite frankly, in most cases, aren't the most sensible way of doing things. But still, I was always been willing to do that, and to to work at whatever needed to be done. I've worked in warehouses. I've worked in at the construction sites. Uh, uh, taking the receipts from the truckers for the clean fill that they were bringing in. This is actually was an area where they were putting clean fill from another construction site. And I've worked in all these other little odd jobs and so on when I wasn't able to get a job as a software developer, which is what I'm most qualified for, which I had most experience in. But still, I've never kept that from uh, uh, pursuing any particular other job that I might get paid for. So I've always been willing to do work uh, of any capacity, and and in this environment, it's been extremely hard to go from one job that you finish to get to the next job. And this is another thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand, though I think that they really should, because most of the American workforce works on this sort of basis. There's a job to do. You finish the job is done. You get paid while you're doing the job, and when you're done, you go look for the next job. I don't understand why people don't seem to understand that that it's the positions that are an aberration. Why do you keep somebody on staff when there's no work to do? So, um, but I've been in positions which have been sort of like that, and I basically said, well, this is silly. I shouldn't really be staying here anymore. I'm going to find something else where I can contribute, where there's actual work to be done. So yeah, I've been willing to do that, and yet for that year, 2019, what did I do? I taught a few classes at a local college here in New York City, and uh, and I sang in the choir. It wasn't really officially anything, and then basically because I didn't have any real income, I had to leave the city. I was homeless for a while, and where I was staying it was where I had the job working as a dishwasher. And prior to that, I was working one thing where I actually shouldn't be employed in was driving a cab. I really do not like being in automobiles at all. I like to walk, I like hike, I can, you know, it was one of my great pleasures about New York City is even in the coronavirus setting, I can go out and uh, hike and, not have many people around me because those are hiking trails through parks. We have St. Nicholas Park and we've got Riverside and so on. So there's a bunch of parks around here that you can walk and not be close to people. The social distancing is maintained. So, at any rate, the key thing for people is that they have an income, and that alone should be the basis of of uh, opening the economy more than it is actually open right now. Because people have a certain amount of income and they have savings. Uh, you know, certain people have income, certain people don't, and so on. But there is some activity along those lines because again, even with the virus, it's it's not a complete shutdown of the economy. It's still working. Commerce is still going on, but it's suffering right now from a severe diminution, and that's affecting the enterprises that need to have a regular clientele, particularly restaurants have been feeling that, even if they have been setting up um uh, the uh, only for delivery, only for takeout. Still, they're suffering because people are not getting food at the restaurant because they're squeezed in terms of money. They're trying to get to pay the rent. That's a big thing. Um, and don't saddle this all on New York City because I know in New Jersey, I know in upstate New York, I know in California and in Iowa and Connecticut and so on, places that I've uh, stayed or lived in for some period of time. Washington, D.C. I was there for 4 years as an industry economist. Uh, we all have to pay the rent, and there are several problems with the way that our real estate system, particularly the mortgages, hyperinflating all the prices of real estate. Uh, so it's a huge burden across the country. And that's another area that I sort of had to put on the back burner a little bit about mention here in this little live stream that really need to abolish the mortgage so that the price of real estate, and this is both the commercial and the apartment buildings, the office buildings, and the and the actual homes and apartments in terms of rent and so on, all of that would come down if the mortgage was abolished. It would come down quite rapidly as soon as the first real estate transactions would have to exist without using other people's money, which is what mortgages are, other people's money that you're using to speculate in real estate, and that speculative bubble would be burst, and then uh, housing and all those types of real estate, storefronts, and so on would be affordable. So if people can uh, uh, try to get that going in their communities, in their own discussions of the importance of that in order to leave more room in people's budgets, which are extremely limited right now, uh, for them to spend on the businesses rather than have to be spending it on the landlords all the time. And this is into the future and so on. But again, returning to the immediate necessity is that we need to have the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend that I've been stressing is absolutely essential so that people can engage in commerce safely at home, getting that money coming in to their bank account. And set this up again at home if you have a computer, and of course, if you're seeing me here, you likely have a computer or something along those lines. You can set that up with the Social Security Administration, and it's very uh, uh, straightforward in the case where you get a Social Security benefit. And I just started with that, and I'm suffering some difficulties in getting the full amount, but uh, all it takes is for the federal government to say, yes, we're going to distribute a $1,500 weekly stipend to every citizen. We've got their social security numbers, they're citizens, we have the social security numbers, we can verify that with other information that the same way that they verified my account. They call it my SSA, my social security or whatever. Uh, you can set that up on the Social Security website. If you are receiving Social Security benefits, you can set up a bank account to do direct deposit into. So all it takes is for our federal government, and this are your current Congress people and the president as well, uh, encourage them to address this by providing money to the people, working this from the bottom up, give money to the people so that they can be consumers of the goods provided by the businesses. And and hopefully mostly local businesses, which is what people most commonly mean when they refer to small business. They're thinking, oh yeah, my local mom and pop five and dime store, my or dollar store, my local restaurant that I normally patronize in person, and now during the pandemic, I want to order some food to be delivered. The pharmacy. I like to have the those, whether they're drugs or whether they are toiletries or what have you, order that from the pharmacy, have them deliver it to me in my house, my apartment. Uh, any other various other things that you can do. A lot of musicians, uh, myself included, have uh, music online that it would be great for you to support them uh, during this time. It's rough because they don't have live venues for a while, and so you can again use the money for that as well. And of course, to pay the rent and the mortgage payments, get caught up on your other bills if you have any debt, and most Americans do have a substantial load of debt. um, to be able to use one of those weeks to pay a good portion of those, get your balances down, and and people need to remember when they make these payments to a landlord, or you make it to a bank, or any sort of institution that is collecting your money in order for you to be have a residence, that they also are getting then money that they can use to pay their bills that are beyond their immediate survival needs. And so it is good to be able to do that. And I know there's been a lot of talk, especially with the Met Council on Housing, which I remember, pushing the rent strike. I think that that places them in that position that I do not think is the best strategy. Though I don't, you know, fault them for trying to do that, because right now we don't have a citizen stipend that would allow this. But if we push strongly for a citizen stipend, that's again, it's a $1,500 weekly citizen stipend. That will be something that will reduce the need for having any sort of rent strikes. This is a win-win for everybody involved in that. A few points I need to bring up again, because a lot of people don't uh, think about these matters, and they take a meme approach to reacting to any sort of suggestion. And that is, first of all, um, there's no such thing as the taxpayer's money. Let's just say that right up front. There's no such thing as taxpayers' money. So when you're just talking about, oh, well, we have to, you're going to be using the taxpayers' money to do this. No, there's no such thing as the taxpayers' money. Why? Well, first of all, once the taxpayer is paying a tax, it's no longer their money. Once it's gone out, no longer their money. It's received by the Treasury, and that's whose money it is, okay? But what happens is that when currency, when the physical item or the ledger balance goes out from the Treasury, it's not money until it's spent into the economy. So just to explain this sort of concept to people, you've heard of people stuffing bills into mattresses and whatnot. And then years later, they say, "Well, look at this Continentals, museum piece or whatever, or Deutschmarks during the Weimar Republic or whatever." It stuffed all this money into the mattress, and it's not worth anything because it's expired, or it's not part of the money supply in the economy because it's not being used in transactions. Money, just to clarify, everybody, money is strictly a medium of exchange. It has no intrinsic value. That's why we're able to print up pieces of paper and distribute that as money. It is simply a way of saying, I'm going to buy a bunch of stuff from you with this currency that I received from selling a bunch of my stuff or my labor in the past, but not too far in the past. And now I'm passing it over to you. It's sort of a hot potato. I got so much for working. Okay, yeah, because I know that I can use it to spend on for an actual potato from the grocer down the street. But if I delay, and the grocer says, "Well, potatoes, they've gone up 50% or whatever," and it's like, well, gee, I guess I'm not able to buy my potato because I didn't ask enough for my labor before. So it does need to be spent quickly. and to follow in that series of exchanges. And that's often referred to as the liquidity of money and so on. It's so that when people are not quickly spending the money, the velocity of money is is less, then it's not a real feature of the money supply, because you know, then transaction and then didn't do it. Okay, so you have to realize uh, that the money that people would get with the stipend uh, is becomes money uh, by virtue of it being, you know, received and then spent into the economy. The money that comes from various people uh, for their economic activity or other things that are taxed, or anything that comes back to a government in terms of revenue. And say, explain in popular capitalism, uh, that revenue can take all sorts of forms, and actually taxation is one of the more um, primitive methods of doing that. I propose a completely different scheme that doesn't involve taxation in popular capitalism. So look that up on Amazon. Uh, and get yourself a copy, and you can read what I have to say about that. The the so it's not taxpayers' money, and once it's received by the Treasury, it ceases to be money at all, because it's done. It was created by going out, it's destroyed by coming back. So once we get that out of the way, you can see that it doesn't have to, in fact, it shouldn't have any prior source. It just simply goes out and gets created as it's being spent into the economy. It gets another bunch of transactions, gets things going, comes back in one form of revenue or another, partially, and then it's still part of the money supply. It goes around for another cycle and so on. So there is no real concern in terms uh, of the budget, uh, which is actually an unconstitutional concept. It's not anywhere in the Constitution. Uh, it is a matter simply of, we spent a bunch of different money. Okay, we created money, and then we destroyed money when it came back in terms of revenue. So our receipts. And the Constitution says the treasurer should give a reporting from time to time on the various uh, expenditures and receipts of the United States. So this is how that works, and a lot of people have been told lies, frankly, by conservatives mostly, uh, and and also other types of Democrats. They've been told lies that we have to, you know, balance the budget, or if we spend more than we are taking in, then we have to have a debt. And it's like, no, you don't have to have a debt. In fact, I wrote a book. It's called The Way Out. I have a copy with me here, no, not right there. It's over on my bookshelf, but um, and it shows how we can eliminate the federal debt through a device I call electronic revenue credits, which very roughly is a chit that gets passed back and forth in the Treasury, which is where the money is coming from, is being created from, the public treasury, and the Federal Reserve system as a central bank. And it can have a successor organization, which I would prefer, a judicial bank. The So you can take a look, and also find that on Amazon, unfortunately. Other bookstores that carry stuff that's covered through CreateSpace, used to be BookSurge. Uh, you can get that book there. I have three other books. the Washington Poems, Science for the Spanish, and The Fallacies of Atheism, that are not economics books. And I'm working on a few others. And so you can get those there, and I'll be reestablishing my printing arrangements with other companies. In any event, this $1,500 weekly citizen stipend is going to head out to the economy. It's going to get commerce going, uh, getting kicked in, getting kick-started again, uh, and uh, and it can all be done from the safety of your own home if it's established properly by our federal government. And let me see. I just wanted to, deal with some of those issues. Oh, there's another thing that, again, conservatives especially like to put out as some sort of way of discrediting uh, what is absolutely essential. In other words, they're trying to discredit the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend by saying, well, then why would people work? People only work for, it's like, have you never done the dishes yourself? Have you never done the laundry? Have you never, walked the dog, or, taught your kids, or have you, not done anything? Uh, of course, people will work. They'll actually work on things that they've put aside for decades, and if they actually get an income, survival income, without having to beg and plead, please give me a job, and likely not getting it. Um, if they're able to just say, okay, forget about looking for a job. Nobody's giving us any jobs. There's not the jobs out there. I mean, yes, there's a little trickle of whatever. The supply side of jobs, uh, economics. Uh, I think it's much more sensible to approach things from the demand side, uh, because uh, because you can't conjure up a supply if you have nothing. The They'll do things that they have not been able to do for years and years and years, and some of those are those neat little inventions that inventors cook up, new ideas for products, new works of art, new uh, books, new music, uh, new pretty much anything else, new crafts, new knitted goods, things that people would do just as a matter of course, and and they're going on this work. Well, that's the attitude actually of most programmers, by the way. Just a little clue you in here on this, okay? Most of us who have programmed for pay say, actually, I do this as a hobby if I could just get a survival income from somewhere else. So, I do this job for free, sort of thing. Uh, that's what the stipend would allow, and you would have such a burst of creativity, such a burst of new things that are made, such a burst of things getting repaired. I actually don't have my sewing gear here where my current digs. Otherwise, I repair some of my own shirts. Uh, but um, but yeah, the people would do things. They don't need to be um, given money or they don't need to uh, be desperate in order to work, to be productive. So that's another false notion that's put out there. Again, it's mostly the conservatives who want to see people enthralled to some boss, uh, usually themselves, uh, and and are unwilling to uh, have people being given money simply for being citizens. Oh, and there's another point, and this I get more from the left, from left democracies, and that's the whole notion of citizenship. Well, if you take a look at popular capitalism, and one of my videos, I show what was the rationale behind the $1,500 weekly amount. You'll see that what I did there was to establish a uniform rule of naturalization. The same for babies, the same for new immigrants. From the time of arrival, each week, they get more and more money. And slight difference from the book, which is just does it on completed weeks to make this a little more saleable, more marketable. Uh, I increased it from 1460 a week to an even 1500. So it sort of rhymes with the Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Socialists promoting $15 a week, not $15 an hour for a minimum wage. And so it's based upon the weeks of residence up to 365 weeks, and then you're at the 1500 amount. So 40 to start off, $4 for every uh, of the weeks of residence up to the 365th week, basically seventh year. And then everybody, uh, whether they're a baby or whether they are an immigrant arriving from another country, from the time of the arrival, 365 weeks, 7 years, they're full citizens. So this is a way of getting that clause in the Constitution actually implemented, because it appears that, quite frankly, it hasn't been implemented. There's been no uniform rule of naturalization. It's been a very prejudiced rule. So that's shouldn't, I think, allow people to feel that. And also, again, it gets in, the people that have been here, um, for generations, and uh, you know, they they should, if they're 7 years or older, they should get the full amount. And people who just came recently should, be receiving a much smaller amount, so that they are earning their dues, if you will, because they will then have to uh, uh, go to work in order to feed themselves and their families, uh, and unless they become a part of another family in which that family is helping them uh, survive. Uh, so this is a way of getting people who are really seriously interested in being residents and citizens of the United States to have a period where they're paying their dues. Uh, Anything else? I think that's pretty much it on the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend. Uh, One other little note here is that if we have more of a money supply, because not enough coming back to the Treasury, then there will be a tendency for there to be an inflation, and that inflation will actually increase the amount that goes back to the Treasury, because the prices of the various economic activities which are taxed, uh, uh, that inflation will increase the amount that is taxed, not the rate, but the amount of tax, and that will bring the supply of money back down. So it's an equilibrating process, self-regulating process that does not require any debts. In fact, I've shown the way out how to eliminate the federal debt, and doesn't require any uh, any particular operation in terms of the other expenditures that are made. As I explained on the way out, it's just left up to Congress to decide how much they want to devote to one thing or another, and whether they're really serious about it in all, which they want to allocate a certain amount of funds for that, for to get the job done, or whether they were just putting out a wish list. Our Constitution protects against these sort of wish list notions by saying, no, you got to, you passed the law saying that this should be done. Now do the separate appropriations bill to give it some funding so this program go on. A few other things actually come to mind at the last second here, is that by providing the necessities, this is basically a cost of living that's being provided through the stipend, then in the employment situation, in the labor market, then the wages don't have to be as high. They could be fairly low. So that when we're talking about that notion of having a $15 per hour minimum wage, well, that can be eliminated. All minimum wages can be eliminated, and the price of the labor would go down to what a actually free market in labor would allow. Now, to say a free market in labor, it's not only from the standpoint of it being non-perturbed by special considerations, and the chief consideration in terms of labor market is the negotiation under duress that workers have had to do when there hasn't been a unconditional provision of the necessities. I say, well, if I don't get this job, I'm going to starve, and I'll take it for anything, because at least it's something. Whereas if they have a separate survival income, they can say, well, make it worth my while. Or they can say, oh, this seems like a fun thing to do. I think I'll come in. And I'll say, sure, yeah. You can pay me, $10 a day, because it's fun. And I would like to do it, but not my entire life. Maybe 2-week segments, and non-committal about coming in for the next 2 weeks. So there's a lot greater freedom that citizens would have with regards to working for somebody, for pay, for wages, in the case that we have this $1,500 weekly citizen stipend. So it might paradoxically mean that there are considerably less labor costs. If the work environment is great, labor costs will come down. If the working environment is horrible, draconian, risky, then they'll go up significantly. And this will affect other matters as well in terms of automation. If it's going to be a roofer job, it'll be a lineman. They're going to have to go down to the mines. Then people say, yeah, you have to pay me $1 million, and maybe they'll get somebody for a few thousand a day for it, but very quickly these dangerous jobs, these jobs that are not something that they want to run the risk of getting injured on, and jobs where they have to come in obscene hours or whatever, those will be the ones that are ripe for automation. So that, before people were worried about, well, if my job gets automated, I won't have a job, I won't have an income, I'll become homeless and whatever. Again, the $1,500 weekly citizen stipend comes to the rescue and says, okay, well, here it is, and you don't have to go into that job if you don't want to, and uh, and all the people that said that they want to quit that job, I can't stand it anymore. I gotta get out of here. Right? Then uh, they're not going to do that. So if you like the job, you're just worried about losing it, you'll find all the people that didn't like the job, we're going to get out of the damn place. They are going to reduce the labor supply for that, and it's going to make you more valuable and increase your wages because you're part of a smaller labor supply for that particular job. Any rate, of course, I didn't have anybody joining me here. I just sort of did it on the fly. So I guess the next time I do one of these little talks, and I'll try to schedule it on a regular basis so that I get somebody here to answer their questions. But again, I just want to urge people to go out and campaign for a $1,500 weekly citizen stipend. Let me just pull out one of my flyers. So here we go. There's my. Oh, okay. Well, I guess it might be in reverse for you. Okay. So you can't see through the paper. Okay. Any rate, yeah, that's the notion I have. On the one of the other videos, I have a picture of that flyer as a screenshot, and I think I have it on Facebook and maybe a few other places where I have that flyer, so you can print it up, post it around when you can get outside to post things, and try to get this this pandemic economy going, because that's really what we need. Is we don't need an economy that is going to encourage the spread of the disease. We want an economy that is properly handling it. So have a good day. Talk to you later.